It's rolling.
Okay, so today is May 31st, 2023. We are interviewing Judy Schachter. I am Susan Kendall, and we are in Toronto, Canada.
Well, thanks.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, Susan.
Today, if you can just tell us your name, your birth date, and where you were born.
So my name is Judy Schachter, and I was born April 19th, 1936, in a city called Košice, which is eastern Slovakia. It's not where we lived, but there was a good clinic, and that's where my mother was taken to have me delivered.
And can you tell us about your first memories? And
First memories, well, it wasn't at that time, but I was told that she actually went into labor on Shabbat, and she was so observant that she insisted to wait till Shabbat was over to be taken to Košice, which was probably like maybe an hour drive. And anyway, I heard about that. But then we lived in Humene, which was a smaller town. And when my parents married, my mother came from a neighboring town called Trebišov. She came to my father's house, and that house consisted, so there were many people living there. This was the old days. And so my father's parents, my grandmother and grandfather Jakubowicz, my father's two younger brothers, and his younger sister, and then there was I and my parents. Well, no, me not first. I was born a year after they were married. And it was a fairly large house, so it kind of was like long house. And our part of the house was at the back. And there was a kitchen, but it was never used for a kitchen. It was used for my toys eventually. It was just a room full of toys. And then there were a few steps up, and we went to, there was a room for the food storage, and then there was the kitchen where everybody, all the women helped, and there was also a helper who lived with us. It was usually a girl from the villages around us, and she lived a whole year, even over Christmas, never went home. And then we had a dining room, a bathroom, and there were more rooms going further, so that was for my aunt and my uncles. And there was a store in front, which I think my grandfather ran, was a grocery store, but the business was raw hides and furs. And my mother, when I think now how she got acclimatized, she came from a much more beautiful home where she lived with her 6 siblings and her mother and father and a dog and a servant. And my grandfather, Grossman, created a beautiful orchard that was absolutely gorgeous, and the home was beautiful. It was very nicely furnished. There was a grand piano. There was beautiful furniture, and that's where I would meet one of my 2 cousins that I loved. It didn't have too many of us at that time yet, and they would come from Prague for family holidays or just holidays, and so I loved being there. And that grandfather spent a lot of time with me. They both did. Both grandfathers did. The grandmothers were, grandmothers. They're hovering over you and wonderful. Both grandfathers, I remember them carrying me on their backs. And when, food was different in those days, you only got food that was in season. So when the first fruit came out, my Jakubowicz grandfather would go to the market and get me fresh cherries, and I remember that it came like in a. It was like it wasn't Loblaws, so it was just a street market, and they made a bag like that, and there were the cherries. So that was I remember that, and my other grandfather carried me on his back as well, and I remember Simchas Torah took me to synagogue, and he walked around with me on his back. So I was still little. So birthdays, often my mother would take the train from Humene to Košice, which today probably take an hour by car. But we took the train, and I know my mother got dressed and she wore a hat, and we arrived there, and probably gloves. I just remember the hat. And if I had my cousins there, it was special. And so actually, I remember from about the time for my 5th birthday, my mother took me there for my birthday, and my cousin came from, maybe it was Passover time. My cousin came from Prague with her mother and her little brother, and they made me a birthday party. And I'll show you later. So I have some photographs from that time. And Maya also had a cousin from her father's side there for my birthday, and 3 girls from the neighborhood, Jewish girls. I didn't know any people who weren't Jewish at that point. And I got a beautiful card from one of my teachers in Humene, addressed to that address, and she wrote a poem for a little girl who's 5 years old, and you know how lovely she is. And I don't know so it's amazing what things survive, because we left things behind when we had to leave for hiding. So that was lovely, and I loved being with that cousin Maya, and that was, it was just wonderful all around. But as we came later years, not many, but during, so I was 5 in 1941, and things got difficult, but I didn't feel them so much. I mean, I know that the adults had to wear a yellow band. I didn't have to do any of that. And if they were restricted and if there was stress, I think it was hidden from the children, so I wasn't that aware. But Maya's little brother, I guess you could, as a child, you stress out. You hear the stress, you feel it. And little Tommy had a suitcase, like almost as an adult-sized suitcase, and I never knew what was in it, but he took it everywhere. He wouldn't go out the house without it. He just had to have the suitcase. So how he took in the difficulties of that time, because the adults really hid it from us, but we must have felt the tension. So still at that time, my mother and I went back and forth from Trebišov to Humene, and in Humene, my grandparents were just very loving and caring, and I had 2 uncles and an aunt just hovering over me. So it was, I was just totally spoiled. And my father's oldest brother was married, and he lived in a town not far from us called Michalovce, and he had a daughter and a son, and they're both older than me. And I adored them. And she had memories. Well, I mean, she eventually ended up in Toronto with her family. She had memories of being allowed to push the stroller that I was in to take me around a little bit. And her brother was younger than her, and he was gorgeous. They were all just gorgeous. And some of the girls that I may have known in kindergarten, or maybe their older sisters, suddenly became very nice to me because they wanted to kind of connect with him. He was just so stunningly handsome. So it was a very warm family feeling. And
did you study at a Hebrew school, or?
No, I didn't really study Hebrew, but there were restrictions on Jews, so we were not to go to public school. And I wouldn't have known the difference, but I went to a Jewish school. It was not like that. It was just a Jewish community, small Jewish community. And there was a beautiful synagogue in Humene, the one it had a balcony like the old style. And I remember sitting there, must have been before the Nazis really shut it down and tore it down. It had a balcony, and I would sit in the front row with my grandmother and my mother and my aunt. And I could look down, and I'd see my grandfather and my father and all the brothers, near the Eastern Wall. And it was, I just remember sitting there. It was hard to see because, even the view would be, there was like not a railing, but like I don't know, it was not a curtain, but you could see down, but you weren't supposed to, I think, I don't know. But that was finished for us during the Nazi era, so we were very restricted. And there was a small building which now worked as a synagogue, and also the Jewish school. So small Jewish community, so we would, the teacher's helper would come and pick me up from my house. I was the farthest away. And then we walked together to all the houses and end up in school. And the first school I remember is kindergarten. And we weren't many there. And we weren't the same age either because there were not enough kids of the same age. And I'll have a photograph of that because we had a Hanukkah play when I was, I guess, 6 years old, so 41, 42. And we were all cooks, we were all chefs. And I was the tallest one at that time, so I have, a chef's hat tall. The girls had like little scarves. And from big linen napkins, they made us aprons. So just attach something to them so the girls all had aprons. The boys had some kind of hats and also little aprons. And I remember the first sentence that I had to say. I don't know what it was about, but it was, in Slovak it was paprikaš so všetkým korením. So we were cooking paprikaš, apparently. Anyway, but when you see that picture, the boys, there were 5 or 6 boys on my left side. I'm in the middle. They all perished. The girls on my right, there's a little tiny girl at the end of the row, and her name was Kvetka, and she was the teacher's little girl. And then there were Surka, Percha, Vera, me, and a little girl called Aviva. And the Aviva story is amazing because Aviva's mother was from our hometown, and her husband came from Poland. They met in our town several years before Aviva was born, and they went to Palestine. And Aviva and her little brother were born in Palestine. And then, unfortunately, at the wrong time, they came back. And so she came to school with us, and we were absolutely delighted because, first of all, she was beautiful. She spoke Hebrew. We didn't know Hebrew. We heard people pray, but we weren't taught it, actually, at this point. I'm 6 years old. And so we all became friends and played together, and she was just lovely, lovely. I'll come to that story later. So I think we had grade 1, but I don't have any memory of it or any pictures of it or anything. That building was not big, and it served all functions. So when my handsome young cousin turned 13, from the one who came with his sister, Jano, he had his bar mitzvah, but it had to be so in secret that even his parents weren't there. I remember going with my grandmother to the services. It was very hush-hush and quick. And I remember that there was a little plate, and you could have a piece of herring. There was nothing. And that was his bar mitzvah. Many years later, he ended up in Palestine and then, Israel. It was Israel. He went when he was still a teenager. And he was here many years later for a nephew's bar mitzvah in Toronto. And I was so stricken by if he goes back to his memory of his bar mitzvah, how a bar mitzvah in Toronto looked for him. He was a magnificent person. He lived to quite an old age. Married a survivor from Hungary, and they had 2 sons, and now that family's, so he and his wife are gone. His son's grandchildren are in Israel, and they all are doing amazing things. Did
you practice traditional Shabbat with your family?
Oh, always, all holidays. It was, my grandmother and my mother, and then and my mother's younger sister used to come and visit, and she and my father's brother, one of Bernard, fell in love. And they got married, but Jews were not allowed to be married anymore. So I was actually at their wedding. It was at an uncle's house in another town, their uncle's, and she was wearing a suit, a skirt and a jacket, and a shirt with a tie even, and there's no bride dress or anything. And it was, and you were not, that was on this, in silence, like you weren't allowed to get married. Jews couldn't get married. So she came to live in Humanes. So now we had another couple there, and they were all great cooks. But the amazing thing is that they loved being together. my mother and my grandmother Yakubovich got along really well, and it was just, I never felt any strife. So Shabbat was a big deal, and that, you know, there'd always be gefilte fish. Now I have to tell you, Canadians, gefilte means stuffed. Yeah, you wouldn't know because you get a jar of balls and the jar is stuffed, but the fish is not stuffed. But we lived near a river called Laborets, and people would go and, you know, catch fish and then sell them on the market. And there would be a big fish brought to the house, like about this big. And I remember waking up in the morning to the sound of my grandmother chopping the fish. Now what they did, I don't know how they did it, they took the fish skin off in one piece. They removed the meat, the bone, and they chopped the meat. I remember the sound of it, and then mixed it with whatever you had to mix it with and put it back in the fish skin. So when it came on the table Friday night, you had a whole fish there. And then it was sliced and there were no bones. The bones were used to cook in cooking, so it would add to the flavor. And so I always think, what do people think it's gefilte? What's gefilte here? And I still think I'd like to try that one day, but I don't think so far it hasn't happened. So yeah, there was always a lot of food. So it was seasonal cooking because there was nothing imported. We were distant from the world, and it was not a rich country. So we ate things that were seasonal, and when the summer came, you know, they'd have to preserve the fruit and the vegetables, and that was big cooking. I remember my grandmother, with helpers, had a whole barrel of cabbage, like they made sauerkraut, and she would put apples in it, which was a real amazing thing. And that would be the food, like the vegetable, and the things that they saved in jars, that was huge labor. I mean, that's why they had to have help if you could do it. My grandmother also made packages of food for Shabbat for people, they're poor Jews. Now people don't think that Jews were poor. And she would have it delivered to them. And some people came to the house, and they would sit I get the shivers, they would sit on the stairs and be so grateful that they got some food. And this will connect with something later, or maybe I'll mention it now. I'm hopping ahead, but by 44, so the transport started in 42. But then there was some agreement made with some American money and two people who really, and even the Pope, I think, maybe helped, though I'm not sure of that, and they stopped the transports. But I'm not going in order, so I have to say, first of all, going back to Czechoslovakia and away from my grandmother, that it was the Czech Republic Czechoslovakia became a country in 1918, after the First World War, because it was Austro-Hungary. And so Czechoslovakia became independent. It had a president called Tomáš Masaryk, who was a very modern man. He studied in Vienna, and he met an American fellow student, and they married, and he took her last name as his middle name. So he's Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk. Can you imagine that in 1918? He was an amazing man and admired by everybody. He died before the Second World War. He was replaced by Beneš. So things were okay for Jews in his era. But in 1930, when the Nazis came to power, Czechoslovakia split up. So the Czechs stayed on their own, and the Slovaks elected a president who was a Roman Catholic priest called Josef Tiso. He was a very highly educated priest. He has a PhD in priesthood, whatever he studied, and he was a rabid anti-Semite, and he was a dear friend of Hitler. And he made a pact with Hitler that Hitler will take all the Jews out of Slovakia. He will pay Hitler an amount for each Jew that he takes, and all Hitler had to do was sign a paper that said we will never return. So the first transports, I had the numbers somewhere. I don't want to quote them from my memory because I don't trust myself. About something like 50,000 were taken, and most of them didn't come back. And then it stopped briefly, and then it ramped up again in 44. And 44 was the time that I felt I could feel it. And I get the shivers now thinking about how my parents and how they handled it all. So new laws came in. Jews can't do this and that, and you can't do anything. You don't have any rights. So one of the first things was that every business, it wasn't yours anymore, it's gone. And it was taken over by a person who would be called an arizator. And I think my father could still pick whom he wanted. So he picked the town butcher whose name was Koshitsky. Now, if you know Toronto, you may know the name Koshitsky here. That's not the Koshitsky. They're my dear, so Mira and Salma are my good friends. And so this Koshitsky was a Slovak butcher, and he had a little girl that I know. And the business, the home, everything was his. We're now chopped liver, and eventually we were leaving there. But when he took over, actually just before my mother and I left, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So before that happened, my grandparents were taken from their homes. And there were 2 cities in Slovakia where they gathered the old people. They weren't really that old then when I think of it. I can't recall the names right now, but I have them now written down. And so the Grossman grandparents were in one place, and the Jakubowicz grandparents with my aunt, with my father's sister, went to Hlohovec and Nové Mesto nad Váhom, but I forget which ones were where. And amazingly enough, my mother and I went to visit my Grossman grandparents. I think we took the train, and it was like a big auditorium, and there's this big auditorium, the floor, and my grandfather, who ran a mill of 400 people, who had this gracious home, is sitting on the floor in this huge room surrounded by people with my grandmother. And from that place, so I don't know how we said goodbye to them, from that place, he still sent me a letter on a scrap of paper to my address in Humene. And that letter is so well put away that I can't find it. I think it's in the bank safe. It's like a little scrap of paper. And he writes to me that I should eat everything Mother gives me to eat because I'm a student and you need to be strong to study. And then to pray that Uncle Eugene and Hilda will come back. So Eugene was my mother's younger brother, one of her 2 younger brothers. He had just married a year before. They had a honeymoon in Italy. They were a beautiful couple. They were scooped up and gone, and we had no idea. So we are to pray for them. We never saw them again. And then he ends with, and then we will go to Palestine. Love. Grandpa. So they stayed there, and then we heard from that place, gathering place, that they were put on a train, and it was known that that wasn't good. Now, my mother's older sister, Maya's mother and father, they had to move from Prague to Bratislava because they're Slovak, and the country separated. So he was the manager of a factory called Tungsram at that time. It was electrical. And he transferred to Bratislava, where he was also the head of that. And they lived as Gentiles, so they were supposed to be Gentiles. And he was also very active in the underground. And he is the person who told my father to get ready to be living in the mountains because the time will come. And my father listened to him, and he went to a place in central Slovakia where he had connections because of the leather industry. And he connected with some people, and they had a hut built in the mountains for when we need it. So this uncle was like, he was certainly powerful even under the Nazis, that they would listen to him in some respect, but he knew what was going on. So my grandparents were taken to the transport, and we get the word, and of course everybody's upset. It's the Grossman grandparents. And Alex, his name was Alex Lipschitz. Alex went to the transport. He got them off the train. So you breathe. And I don't know how much time passed till the next time they were put on the train. And this time he went, and he couldn't succeed. So off they, I
Did he
just
use
get this
a
chef.
bribe, or you don't?
I have no idea how he did it. He was a very elegant man who had a kind of a sense of authority about him. But he was Jewish. But he didn't look Jewish. I don't know how he did it. Anyway, that night, my mother and her sister now live in the Yakubovich home. It was Shiva. I mean, they cried, they wailed, it was horrible. And the next
Do you know
day,
what was going on?
yeah, I kind of knew. I mean, they didn't, I don't know if I now know it in retrospect, but you hear them crying, which my mother never cried, in front of me anyway. And the following day and the days after, I never saw them or heard them cry again. They had to be strong and carry on because survival depended on it, and now we had to get ourselves going. So, but prior to that, actually, I'm hopping back and forth a little bit, not a little bit, but so I hope you can tolerate that. There were several times. So first of all, my father was jailed for something. I don't know what, Jewish, but, and he managed to see if you had money, you could bribe your way out. So he came back. Then somebody alerted us to say they'll be looking for Jews. Now, how stupid was that? This small town, they know exactly where we live, but some neighbor took us in, and I remember that night because that night it was a small house, and we just slept there. My mother brought the duvet with her. That's what they used in those days. Put it in the bathtub, and that was my place to sleep. So I remember that I spent the night sleeping in a bathtub that was made softer with a duvet. Next day we came back, so I guess that moment they weren't chasing Jews. My youngest uncle, Alex, left for the mountains, and he joined the partisans in that area. My mother's sister, so my Uncle Bernie, and my Aunt Helen, Ilu, we called her, Alex told us we have to go, but then we were told by the authorities that we had to leave. The Jews all had to move. I don't know why they decided that we had to. I guess we would be in a place where they could collect us more easily. So we had to move west.
Do you remember what you brought with you?
At that time, we still brought quite a few things with us because, strangely enough, we lived in freedom in that city. So but before we left, so Mr. Koshitsky came with his daughter. I don't know her name. I think she was about my age. They came to the house, and she was very pleased with the room of toys. I don't remember being upset over that. It just didn't matter. He took over after that. And we soon after left by train to the town in the city, actually, in the middle of the country called Liptovsky Sveti Mikuláš, which is in the Tatra Mountains, or surrounded by the Tatra Mountains. And there we had an apartment, and we lived absolutely free. I went to Jewish school. I only remember one thing about the Jewish school, that had a gate going in, and a boy kept the door open for me, and I thought, how nice is that? Can you imagine? Crazy thing. My mother cooked good food, and we had neighbors on the balconies, so there was a little girl there. I'd play with her, and I don't remember, that it was difficult. But on the train from Humenet to Liptovsky Sveti Mikuláš, we left at the same time as Aviva, my little friend from kindergarten and elementary school, and her parents and her little brother. And we said goodbye to each other. I don't know where they got off, but they didn't go to the same place as we did. And so we came to Liptovsky Sveti Mikuláš, and we lived there. It was spring of 44, and we lived there till the fall of 44. And at that time, and my mother's sister went also to that area with her husband, with my uncle, but slightly different part of, they weren't in Liptovsky Sveti Mikuláš, they went to a village that was closer to the mountains. And the uprising started, the Slovak resistance movement. But the Nazis, who there were plenty of Slovak Nazis, brought in German reinforcements, and they were defeated. So that's when we took to the mountains. So
How did you hear about it?
I don't know how my parents knew about it, but it was known, and we left, so all the Jews were leaving. So I don't know how they found I don't remember how we got to the mountains. So, but it was a slow process, because first my mother and I stopped at a village. I don't know the name of the village. They were tiny villages that were kind of at the foot of one mountain. That would have been the road to take us up to where the chalet. Chalet is too fine a word for it. And my father had already gone up. So my mother and I are in this village, and the village is shelled. So she was very, really concentrated on giving me something to eat before we left. And she made coffee, and it wasn't really real coffee we didn't have. And she was in such a hurry, she wanted to make it really nice and sweet. And she put salt in instead of sugar. But, so I remember that. And I don't know if I had anything to eat. And then the shelling was going on, so we ran out into the yard, just my mother and I. I don't know about the people who lived there. I don't remember them. And we crouched down, and there is a shell, and it lands over there. And when it throws up the earth from where it landed, it lands on us, but we weren't hurt. So my mother takes my hand, and we go to there is a little kind of a path that's going up the hill. So we go there, and we crouch under one tree and wait for it to stop, and then we run to the next tree. When we get to the next tree, so my mother wasn't carrying anything much, but she was carrying a prayer book with her.
Really?
And the prayer book is on the other table. And when we got to the second tree, she realized that she left the prayer book at the first tree. So she ran back. I mean, the shooting's still going on. She ran back, she got the prayer book, she came here. Then we continued. Now, we were the only people there that I recall. How did she know where we're going? These are big mountains. They're smaller than the Rockies, but they're bigger than the Laurentians. I mean, they're massive. So the first place we come to is kind of like a shepherd's hut. And my father is there. So then that was, I guess, his first stop. But it wasn't where we were supposed to stay. So somehow, I don't know how he found it. We come to it wasn't, so we spent that night in that shepherd's hut. And then we tried to get to the little hut that was built for us. And it's starting to get dark and rainy. And we just stopped. By now we have some other people with us, kind of a hill, and it's raining. And so my mother puts a blanket down on the hill so I could lie down. And I remember that night because my parents, either they had something, a sheet or something, they were sitting there all night holding it over me so I wouldn't get wet. But it was still fall. It was like September, I think. And the next stop, we come to that next morning, we go to that. I don't know if we had some food with us, I don't remember. And this was not a building, a hut built from wood. Inside were like sheets, like, it's not beds. What do you call them? Now I'm blanking. Bunk beds, like layers, 2 layers, I think. And there were provisions, like we had some stuff, I guess we sent ahead with clothing, food. There may be 15 of us, I don't know, I can't tell. And I don't remember any of the other people that were there. There were openings for windows, but there's no glass in them. So we were there a few nights, and then one night, there was noise around, and there were rifles going through the window openings, and it said, "Everybody out, women and children this way, men over there. It's dark, night." So we go, and we stand all night in the forest, and we don't know what happened with the men. And as light comes, we start trickling back, and everybody's back. But all the supplies are gone. So if we had some clothes that we're going to wear later, they're gone. And the food is gone. And it was Russian-speaking soldiers. Now, the mountains, the Tatar Mountains, were totally populated by Russian partisans, Slovak partisans, Russian partisans who deserted from the Red Army under somebody called Vlasov, and they were Nazis, and Jewish groups. And you never knew who was who. So the commander or whoever was over these people who came to our hut came the following day or maybe a day later and asked what happened and, how did they do? And the group must have decided not to complain about them because that would not be good for us. So they said, no, that was fine, So now we are without supplies. Now we're depending on the villagers down below who would come for a few cents and bring us potatoes and peas, I think. And there was nothing. There were no health facilities. There were remarkable, so I remember one lady who was with us. Her name was Marta Tochten, and I want her name mentioned. She was a Jewish lady. She was a nurse. She had a young daughter who was a teenager, I think, and a young Polish boy, Jewish, who escaped from Poland because things were worse in Poland faster than Slovakia. And he was with her. Her husband was with the partisans, and he had already been killed. Susan, I'm tiring you.
No, I'm just
Okay.
shocked by that's just
So that was Marta Tochten, and she had a knapsack, and she would go to other parts of the surrounding hills, mountains, to help people who needed nursing help. She was amazing. After the war, she survived. After the war, she went to Bratislava. She gathered up the Jewish orphans, and took them to Palestine. And I've never been able to track her down. I don't know what happened with her. There was a family called Teller, where mother, father, and two young boys who were older than me, and they had skis. So once the snow came, they followed Marta, and they went with her to be with people, and they were my heroes. I think I must have had a crush on one of them. Anyway, that was so. They would catch fish in the little brooks, and the peasants would bring us some food, a little bit of something, and they cooked it on fire. But then it was decided that we were too close when the smoke from the fire rose that we could be found, so we went deeper into the mountains. And there, we didn't have anything as luxurious as this first hut. It was just like 4 posts and sheets, and you're out in the winter. And so the clothes that I was left in before they stole the bags is what I had. And I think I had several layers, a little bit of something. And can you imagine, because we take daily showers, for 7 months, I never took those clothes off me. None of us did. We lived in those clothes. There was nothing else, and there was nowhere to change. And it was cold. And we had lice. And there were no toilets, so you had to go over there where it'd be a little further in the snow. And that's what we had. And I never had a cold, but I must have gotten, we were all diminished by it. I mean, the cold, the fright. I don't remember. I remember Saturdays, only because I don't know how they knew it was Saturday, but people would talk about what food they would usually have on a Shabbat at home, and just to make us more hungry, I guess. And they told stories what they used to do. And I don't know what we did. I mean, just surviving, going from here to go pee over there, and to stay warm, and to be near the fire when they were cooking something. It was really hard. And I honestly don't remember that much of it. I remember that one time, my father was always, what he saw, he looked and he saw something on a string, and pulled it up, and it was a bag that one of the families had their grandmother there, and she carried the family money, and that was the money. But I'll just go back a little bit, and so it wasn't, the food wasn't bought as a group. Everybody kind of like had their own guy who came. And my father had run out of money, and he asked somebody in our group to lend him some money, and they refused. It was hard survival. So he found this, and he let them wait a little bit, and then he took it to them. But I think they still didn't lend him any money. But then, I don't know, he got it somehow differently, I don't know. But so it was hard. So you you had to strive for survival from the Nazis, from, the peasants had to come and help you because they could use the few cents they got from you. And then your fellow, so Marta was different, that's why she stood out, and there were different people, but some were there to survive, and so were we. We were all like that, I guess.
Were you frightened?
I was never really frightened. I was frightened once, but I was just coming to that part. So we were running out of food, and it was decided that a group will go down to the nearest village and knock on doors and get crusts of bread. These villages were poor. So my mother, it was mostly women going down, and one guy went with them because only Jewish men were circumcised at that time. And so they could tell a man just to drop your pants and then you right away. So my mother was protecting my father. She went down. And they had a signal that they'll whistle or something when there's danger, and they'll gather and they'll all come back. So they came back, except not my mother. I get shivers when I talk about this. Not my mother. So, of course, I'm scared, beyond scared. And now my father goes down to look for my mother. And it's mealtime, so I guess it was one of those meals that there was a horse, a wounded horse, and they managed to kill him, and they were cooking it. And so that was horse for lunch. And one lady was doling out the food. And so I speak Hungarian and Slovak because those were the languages there, and some German. And she said to me, "You're a good girl. You'll be satisfied with this too." And she gives me a bone. And I'm 8 years old, and I'm thinking, this is not going to do well for me. So I'm scared. I'm more scared, and my parents aren't there. But they come back, and we're okay, and, all is well as can be. And so we lived through the winter, and I don't know how we got through it. And we can hear, so the Russian army, the Red Army, is coming from the east. We're in the central Slovakia. So it's starting to liberate almost where our home was, Humene, because that was right almost on the border. And we can hear that the Russians had a very, I don't know what it looked like, a gun. I mean, it was it wasn't a gun, handgun. It was a huge gun called Katyusha, for a girl's name. And you could hear it from eastern Slovakia. It was that huge. And we could hear the Katyushas. But we're still in the mountains where people around us are, God knows, they're Nazis, they're murderers. We heard that one valley of Jewish people there was actually all killed. So my father stood guard. Every night they had to stand guard. My father never held a gun in his hands, but, they all had to take turns. So it's still hard times. And then my parents must have decided that I was getting weak, and they want to strengthen me up, so to take me down to a village and let mother and me stay in the village with a villager that I don't know how they connected with him. So my mother and I go down. I don't know how she found the place. I don't remember going with anybody else because actually the Teller family went down as well. So we come down, and it was kind of end of winter, sort of, like it was, but still hard in the mountains. And we come down to where the fields are starting, the farmers' fields. And it was so hard to walk on because they were still frozen and very uneven, and I'm stumbling. And the guy that they agreed would do this for us, he is there to meet us. His name is Josef Shebo. I'll cry when I call his name. And Josef Shebo comes and meets my mother, and he sees that I'm stumbling. He puts me on his back. Josef Shebo he has one arm only. He carries me to his house on his one arm, and we come to his house. The house was probably no bigger than like this part here. He has a wife and two girls, or two children, a girl and a boy. And it's warm, it's a small place. And he gives us their beds. We have lice. And they heat up, there's no heating. They heated up bricks to warm up the bed. And mother and I go to bed. They give us something to eat, and we have a good sleep. We wake up in the morning. The village, which probably had like maybe 20 houses, is encircled by Germans with, I think, it could have been Slovaks, Nazis, with rifles. The word is out. Anybody who's harboring a Jew, we burn your house down. We take you. So let out the Jews. He, of course, didn't do that. So there was a plan that I wasn't aware of at that moment, that we go to another place that was bigger and that had a barn. And in the barn, there was a lot of hay. And in the hay, there was a crate, a wooden crate, that was prepared, I don't know for what, but it was there for us. The Teller family went to that farmer, and Josef Shebo, now, he dresses us up. So I think we just had our old clothes. But the village women had these wide skirts, and they had my mother and me. Now, the Nazis are there with the guns pointing at us, and he's walking with 2 Jewish people through the village to that other farmer. I don't know that other's name. And there we go to the barn, and you go through the straw or hay, I don't know what it was dry, and you kind of like fall into this box. The box was like about the size of the dining room table. And Mr. and Mrs. Teller are there with the 2 boys that I love, you know. And so my mother and I slip in there, and we're there. And you just have to crouch. There's no food there. We're just sitting there. And then the owner of that house, so Shebo goes, you know, and the owner of that farm comes into the barn and calls to us and says, you have to get out because they'll burn me down if they find you. So we didn't go. I guess they just refused and couldn't do anything. So then we hear the Germans go, the Nazis go from door to door, and they came to this farm, and we know that they're there because they're in the pigsty and the pigs are squealing, and they came to the doorway that is to the barn, and we hear their voices, and then they leave. Now, if in that moment I would have sneezed, it would have been the end of us. If the rifle guys had seen Mother and me looking maybe a little different from the village women, that would be the end of us. I just can't believe, you know, that was just horrible. But we survived. They left with, they did gather a few Jews. I don't know who they were. They left with them. That night, all clear, my mother and I go back to the mountain. That was our, you know, R&R. But we survived. And Josef Shebo is the hero of this story. I mean, he is. And I have to get busy and get in touch with Yad Vashem and have him, Righteous Gentile. I have cousins in Slovakia. No, I had at that time. And I got in touch with her, and she searched for him, and she couldn't find him anymore. I think those villages, you know, the young people are gone. The old ones died. So she couldn't find anybody. She managed to find the people who saved her, and she had them named Yad Vashem. But so now we're back in the mountains, and we still are not liberated. But the front is moving closer to us. And then there was, I guess, discussion that I wasn't privy to, I wouldn't have understood, that now if we go through the territory that's still considered Nazi occupied, which is very dangerous to go through, and we could be caught any moment, and it's winter still, like it's spring, but it's winter in the mountains. And we could come to a mountain. If we cross that mountain, we'll be on the liberated side. So it was decided by our group that we're going. And all along, there was some food, we had some food stored that in case we need it later, because, like, you know, we never know. And that night, everybody knew we were leaving, and there's the food. So they tried to kind of like warm it up, cook it up, make a fire, and nobody wanted to eat. We couldn't eat. It was just, you were too nervous to eat. So I remember, I guess it must have been left behind. So now we start the trek through the snow, and we have to be very quiet and careful. And we're walking through the snow to different valleys and whatever. And we get to a town. I don't know what the town is called. It's at the foot of the mountain called Chabenetz. And there, when we arrive, and then Mrs. Teller by now is so unwell that they bring her down on a blanket, 4 people carrying her down. She must have been a young woman. She had teenage boys. And whoever was with our group said, we can't leave now because the storms are terrible on these mountains, and you can't survive it. So we wait till the morning, and we take off in the morning. And we start walking, and it's hard walking already. And then my mother goes like that on my eyes, and she doesn't want me to see. There were dead bodies on both sides of people who went the previous days, and he fell and froze. If they went like, had we gone like they did. And my father wasn't athletic, and my mother's holding me. And there was a man with us who was from our part of Czechoslovakia. His name was, okay, I'm blanking. Okay, it'll come to me. Mezei. And his wife was hiding somewhere else, and he was alone, and he was a stronger guy, so my father asked him if he could take me by the hand and pull me up, because there were rocks. There was nowhere to hold on, and if you fell to your death. So we had to we made it up, and I actually have a description of that was printed in the newspaper. I have it, and I'll give it to you. And it's accounted by a lady who was older than me, who made that crossing with her group. I actually met her at somebody's house here, and she was with a bigger group, and when she was going, must have been a few days before us, they weren't sure. They thought that maybe somebody tricked them, and the other side is still Nazis. So they were afraid to go, but they started. And then they had a couple with them who said, we will go, we're not scared. And if we don't come back in a certain time, take it as a signal that you don't come. Anyway, they came back, and those people that this lady was with crossed properly. And we eventually crossed as well, and we come to the other side. It's liberated. The first thing they do with us, they're delousing stations, because we were full of lice. So they took all your clothes, such as we had, and they put them through something to get rid of the lice, and then they washed us with I don't know what. And I could feel the lice going from my hair and all over. Anyway, so now I was clean. I got the same yucky clothes back, all the layers, put them on. And I don't know if a movie, War and Peace, whatever, if you see devastation, so we start now to go back home. How do you go? Nothing's working. So you see this empty space with dead animals. There is a sick guy on a cart pulled by a horse. My father knows him. He's got typhus. I don't know how, there's no transportation. My father finds a Russian convoy of trucks. And they're going east. They're going back east. So he gets a ride for us in the back of a truck. But it's like about 10 trucks. And progress was slow because the bridges were blown up, and they said, everybody off, you have to help bring my father was no builder of bridges. Anyway, somehow they got through. But at one of the stops, the driver, or the guy who's with the driver of the foreign truck, comes looking at what everything is doing, and he sees me and my parents in the back of a truck. So he said, he'll take me and sit with him in the front. So that was okay. My parents allowed him. So that was interesting. And I was more comfortable, and he comes to Humane, and he comes to the house with us. He was Jewish. He was a Jewish Soviet soldier, but he wouldn't, they were not to admit that they're Jews. And he told me then, I have a little girl like you, and I could cry about that. He came back to see us again, but then they left. So that was the time when the Russians were our friends. And of course, there were many, many Jews in the army. So we come back. I don't know how many days that trip took. We come back to the house. Now you want to see who came back, who's there. So Uncle Alex, we had two Alexes. Alex Lipschitz, to our home. So this was my grandparents' home. They're not there, of course. We knew that.
Was it ransacked, or?
Yeah, it was. So the Russians were using it as one of their places, and like we had wooden floors, so they made a bonfire in the middle of the floor. Things were like everything was strewn on in the yard. So I have some photographs were out in the yard on the ground, but nobody cared because we lost the people who cared about everything else. And then you wait to see who turns up. So my aunt, my mother's sister, came back with the baby boy who was born just near the end of the war. So she called him Ivan. Yeah, he was a sweet little boy with a sad story in the end. And they come back, so now we are in the house together. There are no grandparents. And Elizabeth, my Aunt Brigitte, so my father's sister, hasn't turned up yet. She was in camp. Now, she was taken in 44 with her parents. And she comes to camp, and there are the young women, some of them from the families that my grandmother used to send food to in Humene, her mother. And they feed her. They help her survive. So she survived. And actually, these are the people who were written about in the 999. Some of them, they're from my hometown. So she comes back, and she was actually engaged before the war. Her fiancé was killed. And eventually she marries somebody who was, close to the family. And she goes to live in another town, and she has a baby boy. And so Mother and I, and many people, and mostly women, they come with food. The train passed not far, it's a small town, so the train's passing through. And they go to the trains that come from Poland. And when the train stops in Humene, they give out the food, so, because I'm sure there was no food on the train, people coming from camps. And everybody's asking, did you see, because you don't know who survived. So you're hoping you'll see somebody of your family who survived, and there weren't many. So I remember going to the trains. And then you start going to school. So schools were now public schools. I've never been in a public school before. And they're huge because they don't have the facilities, so they're like about 60 children in one grade. And I'm in first year gymnasium. And I remember now, in retrospect, sometimes I would sit under the desk and cry. And a teacher wouldn't even notice that. And nobody told my mother, and I didn't tell my mother. There was nothing to tell, It was just like we were still a group of Jewish children, so we were together somehow. And we would hear things like, look, more came back than left. And I have still, they were throwing stones at us. I had something here from a stone.
Children?
Children, yeah, my, classmates. But some were very nice. I mean, that was in the soil there. You can't avoid it. So the Jewish kids kind of kept together, and then we started to be members of the Zionist group, and so we got some spirit that way. And I actually went to a winter camp that my father really didn't want to send me back in the Tatra Mountains, Scary, because another group of children were actually, in danger. I think some were killed. There were still Jews killed after the war when they came back.
By who?
By the residents, Slovaks. There are plenty Slovaks who were Nazis. Mm-hmm. You couldn't tell who was who. I forgot to mention, or did I mention early on, that one of the rules about Jews, they couldn't have any jewelry or any valuables, so you had to give it to the government. So one of the things they gave some things, and some things they gave to neighbors to please, candlesticks maybe. So when we came back, you asked the neighbors, they said, the Russians took it all, which maybe they did, they didn't, but whatever. The government gave us back what we gave them. And one of the things that we gave them was a precious piece of jewelry that I had. I was a little girl, and my Grossman grandfather gave me a tiny, tiny little Star of David, gold, like that. And it was tiny. And they turned that in, because you can't have gold. And they gave it back to me. They gave it back to me, so I have it. It's such a prized possession. That was my jewelry on my wedding day, my Star of David. You have to look with a microscope to see it. So we now have Jewish groups together, and we go to public school, Gymnasium 1, Gymnasium 2. I have a wonderful teacher, a Jewish teacher in Gymnasium called Regina. Okay. Oh, Deutsch, Regina Deutsch. And she has a little boy born after the war, Yuri. And he's the one I mentioned. He now lives in Toronto. He came here after when, the communist regime ended, sort of when the borders opened, or even before maybe he got out. His parents stayed in Slovakia. And I actually got to see them, and they came to visit him. So that was nice. And we Jewish kids kind of stood out, but we stayed as a group, and we had our Zionist group. And then really, once we realized that this is nobody else is coming, the little girl, Aviva, of course, didn't come back. Her brother didn't. Her father didn't. Her mother did. And I remember her mother coming to the house, and I don't think she even had a photograph of her child. And then she just left. And I'm thinking now, nobody was tending to these people. She must have been so broken. I had no idea where she went. So it turned out she left for Palestine with her sister. She survived with her sister. And there I found out through this book, and then the person who was, that she married and she had other children. And there was actually a movie made now in Israel by a young Israeli movie maker called Love It Was Not. And it tells the story of Aviva and Aviva's mother and the two children. So the father was separate. They took the men separate, killed him separately, going into the gas chambers. And Aviva's aunt was one of the girls of the early transport, and she was there. She was extremely beautiful, just absolute beauty. And one Nazi took a liking to her. Who knows what he did with her. And she could ask him to go to the gas chamber and get her sister out, which she did. He took Aviva's mother out. And Aviva's mother turned back, and Aviva apparently said to her, "Don't worry, I'll take care of the baby." The doors close, and she goes to her sister. The guy takes her to the sister, and the sister can't bear to tell her what's happened. So she asked her, and the sister says, "No, they'll be fine. They're being looked after. You'll see them." Finally, she finds out. I mean, I get shivers all through this, honestly. And this is what she survived. So an Israeli filmmaker made a movie about Love It Was Not. The sister actually, he was put on trial in Germany, and the sister went to testify against him. Now the sister and the mother have died, but the children got in touch with me because I made a note. I commented when I heard about this that I knew Aviva, and they didn't have the picture, that the child's name was Aviva, and I named my daughter Aviva for her. Yeah. So anyway, I'm not much in touch with them. I for some reason find it hard, but I've got to pick it up and do it. So where are we now? We are now trying to gather ourselves, my father again at the helm. And no country wants Jews. There's Holocaust, there are not many of us left. So my father knew he wanted to get out. So now what? He tried Australia. He may have gotten something, Venezuela, Canada, but we had relatives in the States, nothing doing. My mother had, so my grandfather's brother and two brothers and a sister were in the States. But because we were like my father's other two brothers, well, at least one brother who was not married to a Grossman, so the Grossman family couldn't sponsor everybody. And anyway, there was a long wait. You just couldn't do it. So, sorry, before we're taking off, so different people land in Humene to be with us. They're just the remnants of what happened to our family who were in Hungary. Hungary was really almost safe until it wasn't, and then it got brutal. So my Aunt Rose, who was married to my grandfather Grossman's youngest brother, they went to Budapest. They lived in Košice, but then they went to Budapest for some reason. And she has Otto, Erwin, Michael, and Alex. And she's pregnant. And her husband's with her. And one day her husband walks out. He goes, I guess, to get some food. And he takes Alex with him, and they both disappear. Gone. So now she is looking after her children, and she has to get food and not be rounded up. And she pretends that she's deaf and dumb, that she can't, if she's asked questions, she's deaf, she can't hear. I don't know how she got through that. She was a very beautiful woman. And she survives the war. And Susie, her baby girl, is born right after the war. And now she can't manage because she's got all these kids and she has nothing. So the kids get doled out. She keeps Michael and the baby with her. Erwin comes to live with us in Humene. And he goes to school with me, and I'm so thrilled. He's 3 years older than me. I have an older brother. Otto goes to Bratislava to be with Maya's family. Rose's husband's brother, so my grandfather's brother, who became a very prominent, successful man in New York, he now works on getting them to America, and they will leave shortly. But in the meantime, we've got Erwin there. Then there were two twins, a boy and a girl, who were related to my father, and they were from Hungary. Everybody in the family gone. They were in camp. I don't know what experiments were done on them. He was a tall, strong-looking guy. She was a petite girl. They were twins. They came to stay with us, and an aunt also who has nobody left. So they come to Humene, and we have a house full. It's wonderful.
Were people sad? Did they tell their stories?
No, nobody told stories. No, no stories. I don't remember stories. So Erwin is eventually brought to America by my grandfather's brother Isidore. Erwin and Aunt Rose and his siblings, they come to America, and they prosper because they all go to university. They're all brilliant and very successful. There is an interesting a cousin. So the uncle, my grandfather's Grossman's brother Moritz, and his wife Sarah were childless, and they took, I don't know how they worked it, another sister of my grandfather's had 4 children, and the childless couple took in Lily. So Lily survived through horrible things, but she survived with her adoptive parents, but her aunt and uncle, and her mother, father, and siblings were all killed. She survived horrific, like she really, I have her story somewhere and I don't have the details. She survives. Uncle Isidore, again, the great Uncle Isidore, brings her to America with her father, Uncle Moritz, sorry, and she works in Isidore's factory, had a men's clothing factory, Groschar clothes for Grossman. It was on Fifth Avenue. He had a massive apartment on Fifth Avenue. You know, he's really, and he makes now, so they all manage because of his help. And I'm going back and forth. We're still in Slovakia, so coming back, we're in Humene, and there's no place that will take us. And my father's desperate to get us all out because this Iron Curtain's coming, you know. It's now 45, 46, 47, we're still there. You're not allowed to sell your house. You cannot exchange your money to dollars or you go to jail. You can't, in other words, you can take your clothes and go, but just some clothes. And so my father manages on the black market to get some dollars. And then we are still in Humene, and he gets word that they're going to come and search the house. So I am now, 11 years old, and I have a school bag, leather school bag, going to school. And he puts the dollars in my school bag, and he says, okay, sweetheart, you go to school. And I go to school. I know what I have. And they didn't come searching, so now he still has the dollars. He's got to figure out how to transmit them. So my father travels to Prague all the time, and he tries to get into the embassies to befriend somebody who would help him. So he finds a guy in the French embassy who will take some money for him. So he transfers some dollars to him, and it goes to, and something else, I don't know, and it goes to France with him because they have immunity. And then he found out that he could get, if he got a visitor's visa to Canada. Canada still doesn't want Jews. This is 48. Visitor's visa to Canada, and he comes here and he becomes a farmer, he'll become a landed immigrant. So he proceeds for the paperwork. He gets himself this visitor's visa. For my mother and me, only for France. We only have visas for France. And we all leave for France. So now this is not an easy process because you're not allowed to sell anything and you can't bring too much with you. So you have to make a list of stuff that you'll take. For instance, 2 blouses, not 3. You submit the list, stupid things, and then they'll say, no, you can have 3, you can just have 2. Then they send somebody from the government and they'll do the packing according to what's on the sheet that's allowed. And I had a friend who played the mandolin, and I told Father that she put it on her list and she was allowed a mandolin. I didn't play anything. My father went out and bought a mandolin. At least he'll have mandolin instead of the money that he has to leave behind. Something. So we come with the mandolin, and we're packed by the official people, and we take the train to through Czechoslovakia to Prague and pass to the German border. My 2 uncles come with us. But when we get to the border, they have to get off the train and they stand behind the fence, my father's 2 brothers. And they keep saying, don't forget about us. And my mother and I and my father get on the train. And at that point, the guys, the Judy or whoever, takes us off the train because we have to be searched. So they take us to separate rooms. I'm with my mother. I had long braids. They undo my hair to see I don't have anything on my hair. I had to take all my clothes off. And we didn't have anything on us because you wouldn't be stupid enough to do it. But I remember the moment when we got back on the train, because I wasn't even together with my father when they finally let us back on the train. Then the train started moving. I thought, it was just such a good feeling. But I looked back and my 2 uncles are waving, say, don't forget about us. Because they didn't have permit to go yet with their families. So by now they each have a wife and a baby boy. So we arrive in Paris and we rent a little room up in a top floor. There is nothing there. There's no washroom. There's a bidet in the room. Main things in France. And my father stays a little while with us, and then he takes off for Canada. And he's met on the dock by his cousin from Youngstown, Ohio, whose parents are the ones that my parents wanted to send me to in Hungary to keep me safe. They were all wiped out, his sister, their family. And his name was Bela, Albert Mandel, and he waited on the dock for my father. That was wonderful. And my father started get going. At that time, the government of Canada wanted farmers, so he could connect. And he had a friend who was from Slovakia who was a lawyer, and he spoke English already, so he helped my father. And they sent 2 people from Ottawa with the car and take my father to buy a farm. So my father always regretted that they didn't take him to Finch and Bathurst. He went to Blythe, Ontario. And outside Blythe, not in Blythe, he buys a 220-acre farm for $12,500.
Where did you get the money?
From Bela and from Uncle Isidore. Borrowed money. And puts a down payment, and now we have a farm. And so now he's a landed immigrant. And to the day he died, he was so proud of the fact that he became a landed immigrant. And so now he can send for his brothers and for my mother and me. We were in Paris for 6 months, living in that place. And my mother had a hard time getting visas, too, because she would go to the English to get an English visa to come to London, because we're sailing out of Liverpool. And they wouldn't give her a permit unless Canada gave her a permit. So, and back and forth. This one wouldn't do, And she put herself into the Berlitz School to learn English, and the Jewish organization was giving classes on how to learn a trade, because my mother didn't have a trade. So she learned how to do fur, how to work with fur. And finally we get a visa after 6 months. But we have an interesting time in Paris. I mean, she knew when we could go to museums free of charge. And she sent me to Alliance Française. And she took English lessons in Berlitz. So we managed. And also Uncle Isidore, the big uncle, comes from New York to see the family that's left in Europe. And he also donated equipment for a whole hospital to Czechoslovakia. So first he stops in Paris and he takes my parents and me out. My father was still there. And that was lovely. And then we visited a family of his wife there. That was an interesting evening. I don't think I'll go into that, but it was very interesting for me. And he was the big man. He stays at Prince George Hotel next to the Arc de Triomphe. And my mother and I go to visit them there. It's like a palatial suite, it's just wonderful. He takes us out, and then he goes to visit the relatives who were left in Slovakia. So and he's welcomed in Prague because he was a donor. And then he comes back to America. But my mother and I, eventually we can get to London because now we have the visas. She finally managed it. And the great thing in London is my mother's younger brother, Uncle Mickey, in 1930-something, is on family business in Prague. Where is he? In Prague. He's in family business in Prague. So it must have been before they split even. And he meets a group of friends and they say, we're all getting out of here. So he phones home to his parents in Trebišov, my Grossman grandparents, and he says, I'm going to leave with my friends. So they take the train. They think they're going to London. They want to go to London. And they're taken off the train in Germany and just put in jail a little bit, but they manage to get out, and they end up in London. And so he doesn't know anybody there, but somehow he manages. He's a young man, and he rents, I think he rents a room, or he finds out there is a family who came from Berlin. It's a mother, a son, and a daughter. And eventually he falls in love with he and the daughter fall in love, my favorite Auntie Zenta, and they marry during the war, and they lived there through the Blitz. And then he has a little boy, Johnny, right after the war. They come back to Bratislava to visit us in 1946. Now, we had a horrible tragedy on top of all the other tragedies. My uncle Alex Lipschitz, who was in the resistance, who after the war was very valued by the Czech president was in England during the war, Beneš. He succeeded Masaryk, and he comes back as president of Czechoslovakia. Now Czechoslovakia again together, and Uncle Alex is somehow. Because maybe his activities during the war, he is valued by the government. So he's rewarded for his work, and he's given a stunning villa in the hills of Bratislava, which has intercom, swimming pool, huge space, beautiful place. And he's sent on one of the things he did, he had to go to Vienna for some government negotiations. And he's given a government car with a chauffeur, but some of his associates need a ride as well, so never mind the chauffeur, I'm just going to drive myself. And he drives to Vienna. I think he got to Vienna on the way back, there is an accident with a Russian vehicle, and he's dead. So Alex is dead after he survived the war. And this was, so Aunt Terry she takes to her bed and she doesn't come out. My mother and I get on a train, go to Bratislava, and are there with her and Alex's sister, who stayed with the family, Ruženka. She stays with her, and Terry is inconsolable. It's just a terrible blow. And Maya and Tommy are young still, and their father is gone. This big hero of our family is gone. So this was a huge hole in our lives. And Terry's life. And it just really condemned them to stay there because she felt that she always was very proud. She didn't want to be on anybody's dole. And so, when we all wanted her to come out, no, she won't come. When she finally came for a visit, she was terribly depressed because she realized that she made a huge mistake. So she stayed on, and she died in Bratislava, and she worked so hard because it was tough. It was really tough. Her children were educated, both became doctors, both became cardiologists. And she was so diminished in her physical. She worked like a horse. She looked after the babies when they came, and so that was Bratislava coming back. But now we are in London, and we see Uncle Mickey. It's wonderful, and we take off for Canada, November 1st, 1949. So my mother and I, my uncle Alex, my father's two brothers, Alex with Gabi and little George, and Bertie with Ilu, my mother's sister, and Ivanko, Ivan. And we're all on this boat, beautiful boat, but the North Atlantic in November is not the place you want to be, and it's a terrible voyage. And of course we have, cabins down at the bottom of the boat. And my mother, who'd never been on the ocean, she knows to tell me that we got to get out and be on the deck because there's air there, and not, So we walk through the corridors, and there are always barf buckets all along. Everybody's barfing. It's just like horrible. The tables in the dining room are attached to the floor with a metal chain because they go like this and they go like that. But we manage. We manage to get food, and we sit on the deck outside and get air. So we survived okay, but Auntie Gabi got terrible seasickness, and she was really, really ill. So it was hard on her, and I don't know how Ilu did, but anyway, everybody managed. We get to Montreal. My father's waiting for us, and so from there on, Alex and Gabi go to the farm. Bertie and Ilu stay in Montreal, and my father, mother, and I. And they think maybe they can start some business, but they really can't. So eventually Bertie and Ilu go to the farm as well. And my father and my mother and I, so my father rented a place for us. So when we came, I don't know where he was staying, but he found a place with a Polish Jewish family, the Meisels, and they have a mother, father, a girl, and a boy, and a grandmother with them. And now my mother and I and my father come there. So it's an apartment. There's one bathroom and one kitchen. And this was such a lucky thing for me because their daughter, so we arrived the 9th of November. The 10th of November, she takes me by hand, and she speaks Polish, and I understand Polish because it's like Slovak. And she takes me to Strathcona Academy, and she's in grade 8. And so I go with her. I'm the same age. And they give me a chair beside her. And now I'm in grade 8, and I don't speak the language, and no teacher ever paid any attention to me at all through the rest of that year. Nothing. One time, one teacher once gave me a comic book, and I was so insulted because comic books were really looked down on in Slovakia. You're just an idiot if you read comic books. But Rona was the angel on my shoulder. I read her notes, I copied them, I memorized them, I didn't know what I was saying. And one way or another, you learn it. By the end of the year, I heard English around me, and she was just a wonderful, beautiful person. And I connected with her many years ago, but then I didn't. I saw her once in Montreal. She married, she also was a teacher, and she didn't have children, but she was a beautiful person. So that was my lucky thing. And then we go to the farm, my mother and I, at the end of the school year. Now we're in this little farmhouse, 3 families. There's no indoor toilet. And I don't know, I think there's a wooden stove. I mean, it's a big farm. And I don't know what they did with it. We had a barn, there's a tractor. My father I go to school, I go to school, we're there over the summer. And then in September, I start school at Clinton District High School. And so the school bus comes to Blythe, Ontario, so I have to get to Blythe. So they got me a bicycle so I could cycle to Blythe, and you can just leave it there, and the bus will take you to Clinton. in winter, there was a girl down the next farm, and her father would sometimes take her on a sled. So I went with them, and I don't remember her name anymore. And I also, my father sometimes took me with the tractor. But I had a summer job there with, that summer, I think, must have been the summer, with the girl, and I don't remember her name, and her brother. And there was a country school somewhere in the vicinity, so one-room country school. And we were given the job of bringing in the cut wood and cleaning the windows and just tidying up and putting up the desks. And we would bicycle there every day and bicycle back. So it was kind of like fun. So that was, and I got some money, and then I went to Woolworths or Kresge's, I don't know which, and I bought something, I don't remember what. So that was my first job. And then in September I went to school, and by now I knew English, sort of. And the teachers were very nice. And I don't think there was no other immigrant there. So, and I, felt very lonely. But the kids were not unkind. They were decent, but I didn't make friends, really. And then at the end of that year, we sold the farm. We were now landed. We were Canadian, sort of. And we went to Windsor, and my Aunt Helen Ilu, my father's brother, stayed in Windsor, and we stayed in Windsor for a little while, but my father decided that he didn't want me to grow up in Windsor. It wasn't a big enough Jewish community. So he actually sent me ahead to Toronto. There was an aunt that my father also brought out, an uncle, a brother of my Yakubovich grandmother. And she lived near Harbert Street, near Christie Gardens, Christie Pits. And she just said, see over there is a school there that was Harbert Collegiate. So I walked down, and they took me. And they put me in grade 11. And there I am. So and then I meet wonderful people there. I met Tybee Zeldin, and she was born here already, and she somehow befriended me, and it was very kind. And then I meet Mira, who later became Koshitsky. She was Mira Martin, and we became very close friends and met with other immigrant children, young people. We weren't children anymore. So, I came into my own kind of space somehow, and nobody spoke. I mean, one of our friends was from Yugoslavia, Bill Gleed. He's the only survivor of his family. He lost his parents and his sister. And he never talked about it. We never talked about it. In later years, he became a major Holocaust speaker. He went to testify against the last Nazi, I think, in Germany. And he did tremendous work. But you wouldn't have heard a word from him before. It was, we were all like that. I don't know. We just never mentioned it. I don't know. One time I was volunteering there was an Anne Frank exhibit at Ontario Place, and my mother volunteered there with me. And they had Holocaust speakers, people, and I was taking kids around the Anne Frank exhibit, school groups. But somebody didn't turn up for a Holocaust talk. And I said, okay, so I'll tell them my story. So I did. And one of the volunteers was a girl who was at Harbert Collegiate with me, but we knew each other, but didn't. And she stood at the back of the class, and she listened to me, and then she said, you never told me. I didn't talk to anybody about that. Actually, those girls didn't really, they weren't unkind to me, but they had their own group, except for Tybee. So, and it was Tybee who was dating a guy who was in biochemistry, which is where Harry was. And she used to take me along on their dates, and then she thought, well, let's get somebody else. So she brought George's friend, Harry, and another friend, Moish Feldman. So that's how I met Harry, husband. Long story.
And then you had children?
And then we had children, yes. Yeah, we had children, Aviva, named for Aviva, and Asher, named for Harry's father. And Harry had a wonderful life, but then he had a terrible tragedy when he was 18. So he was from Vienna, and his father actually did medicine with Harry's uncle, the two brothers, and then he did dentistry. So he was a practicing dentist, and they lived in Vienna. Harry's father's brother went back to Romania, where they're originally from, and in 1938, the brother, Harry's uncle from Romania, sends them the permit to go to Trinidad to get out of Vienna. This is before Kristallnacht, but after Hitler was there already. That was like the last second they could get out, and they take a German boat to Port of Spain. Port of Spain took in Jews, which is unbelievable. They end up in Trinidad, and of course nobody speaks the language, and Harry's 5 years old, and they're with a group of immigrants together, but then once war broke out, they're enemy aliens all of a sudden, so Harry's father's put in a camp. That was a bit off because, like, they're Jews, so how are they enemy aliens? But they were. But after that, they were free, and Harry and the other Jewish boys go to a Roman Catholic school, St. Mary's College of Immaculate Conception, and they get the most amazing education you can imagine. And Harry's a very promising student, so the priests really take care of him.
They knew he was Jewish?
Sorry?
They knew he was Jewish?
Oh yeah, of course they knew they were Jewish. There were a whole bunch of Jewish boys there. All Harry's friends. Shura Verona is still here in Toronto. Oh God, I can't think of all their names, but Musha Shichman, all of them, Catholic school. And they just gave them the most amazing education. And one priest, Father Leifok, really took Harry under his wing. And Harry actually graduated his high school diploma at the age of 13. And then they just kept working on him. And they have something at the, mathematics was his strength. They had something from the colonies that they have an island scholarship. And the exams were sent to Cambridge University to be marked when they took the exams in Trinidad. And based on that, Harry got an island scholarship, which gave him 7 years of tuition at university and room and board money. It was a great, great honor, and they were very proud of him. And so Harry his parents came to Canada. I mean, you know, it was the end of the war, it was time, and they needed a Jewish community. Harry's father was a great Zionist. Anyway, Harry, his parents are here ahead of him. Harry comes to start first year, but he's not anywhere, not taken in. Father goes around to universities to see with Harry. He wanted medical school. Well, never mind the marks, he was too Jewish at that time. So he didn't get to medical school. He didn't care. He said, okay, we'll do biochemistry. So he enlists for biochemistry first year. For 4 years in running, he's the first in the class. And he's tutoring the others. So then he applies for medical school this time. He can't say he's not good enough. So they took him. And then it was really a little bit better for the Jewish students. And he does medical school, and he's number 1 for 3 years, and then he's number 2 in the 4th year. He says, because that's when he married me. So I did it. He's a great guy. He is a great guy. He has a big heart and a bigger brain, and he's now in dementia care at Brickcrest, so it breaks my heart. He has a glorious singing voice, which he, one guy should have so many talents. So he sang in the Mendelssohn Choir, if you know, that was with Toronto Symphony. But he sang in choirs, just Hart House Choir, and now in later years he sang in Jewish homes, like in all these retirement homes with another group. And then at the Baycrest, he did many concerts with our son Adam, grandson Adam, who plays the piano and sings. And they did for about 8 years Wednesday night concerts at the Baycrest Wordsman Hall, which I recorded very badly, unfortunately, but I did. And So he has that saving grace because the music stays with him and he can enjoy it now, but it's the only thing he can enjoy. And he's sad because he knows he can't do anything. He can't walk. That's why we are out of here. He's out of here, and I'd have to be as well eventually. Sooner better than later. But yeah, so.
And you have grandchildren?
My grandchildren are all wonderful, of course, whose grandmothers, So the oldest one, so Aviva has 2 kids, Adam and Sarah. And Adam went to Queens and he became an engineer in computational science or something. And then he worked for 2 years in Toronto. He went to CHAT, so he's, conversant in Hebrew, and he did a double program. And he went to Bialik as well, so it was that. And after working for 2 years, and he has a music group here, and they used to. He plays the piano. So he applied to, he had to take, they have to take a course for a graduate school, which he thought was very difficult. And he applied to different universities. He thought they wouldn't get anywhere. So he got in at Stanford with full scholarship. And University of South California, they all invited him to come and visit, which he did, had a great time. But the one he really wanted was MIT, and finally got MIT, and he's there. So he's doing 3rd year in computation. And Harry, so Adam they used to come always for Shabbat dinner, all 4 of them here. Asher lives in Boston, so, and Friday night they'd be here, and Adam would always stay overnight. Sarah not always, but Adam did. And Harry has his study upstairs, and Saturday morning, not shul, they would do science. Adam and Harry did science. And he really taught Adam just amazing stuff. So he was very receptive. He's a very bright kid. And Harry always told him, you have to study the brain. And he listened to that, so he's working on the brain. Well, or something. So that's Adam. At the moment, he's in Italy because he applied to give a talk on his work at a conference in Sardinia. So he's there, having a wonderful time. He gave his talk and met people from Cambridge, and he thought they were very good, so connecting. So that's Adam. Sarah is in Toronto. She's applied for stuff. She wants to do genetic counseling. She also graduated Queen's CHAT, but she didn't get in. It's a weird process. She is absolutely top academically, and people doing the interviews were not the professors but the students, and I don't know what they look for. They look for a drama queen or somebody, which is not. So she'll try again. And in Boston, we have Noah and Audrey, and they're great. Noah's already graduated at university, and he's brilliant. He's working in film. So I don't know where he'll go with that, but he's got many options. He's fascinated by language. He has submitted articles to Wikipedia about language that I mean, after the first sentence, I can't follow him, but they accepted it. And Audrey just graduated university, and she's very interested in animals, so I don't know, she may do something with that. So they're lovely. And I had, we had this wonderful idea, because they come from Boston for 2 weeks, and you have to share them with everybody. So we decided for 1 week we take them to a lake, and we had them to ourselves. And we did that for about 8 years at a very small little resort on Sparrow Lake. A train goes through it, so it's not high class, but it was wonderful, and they bonded, and the kids got to know each other, and we had a week every summer together. Now, of course, we can't anymore. But I'm so glad we did that. And so, and now Adam is there, so I know we have family there. And we have a family tradition. Now we do Friday night Zoom. It's not very Shabbosdik, but we do Friday night Zoom so we can all see each other and talk. And
you celebrate all the traditions?
Well, I don't follow them, and I do less and less all the time. Unfortunately, I don't go to synagogue. I know I'm not.
Do you believe in God still?
It's a big question. I believe in my people, and I believe in ethical behavior, and I don't know about God. I've witnessed too many things. I'm not mad at God, but I just don't know.
And did you feel anti-Semitism when you came here?
No,
Never?
no, I didn't. That's why I'm so upset about what my grandchildren are facing. Yeah, Sarah was a great fighter, and yeah, it's this generation is in danger. I really worry about them. I worry about Israel. I just can't believe it. It was stupid of me. I mean, how would this never died? It's never going away, but it's really bad now. And there are many reasons. We've opened the gates for everybody, and no, I'm very pessimistic. But I hope that my kids are strong enough, my grandkids, that they can go through it. Yeah.
Is there anything else you would want to share with us?
Oh, I probably will think of all of it when you come back, when you leave.
Yeah.
The pictures, oh my God. Okay, where do I start? Sorry. Can we pause for a second so I can get gathered? Yeah. Can I get you any more water or anything? Oh, this wasn't the original. She just protected it. So, Gebetbuch für Israeliten. So that all the prayer books were the translation was, see, I don't want to take this paper off, but it was in this leather holder, like this. Yeah.
And that was the prayer book your mother was
Yes,
holding?
yes. She was carrying that. And it's so interesting to see it. So here's the front page, and it's printed in Vienna, Schlesinger. They all did. And like so. And the translation is in German. But it's that old German type.
Hold it a little higher.
Yeah. Oh, okay. They're okay?
No, I can see that. See, that's fine.
Okay,
Got it, yeah.
got it? Okay. Amazing.
Oh, he fell.
Yeah.
And that's a prayer book that you brought with you.
Yeah. My mother brought it, right? But so that she had it with her. So I think she got it on her wedding day from her parents. Okay. Here's my mother. And what is this? That's my mother in her home playing the piano, but I never heard her play here. We even got her a piano, but she didn't play. My mother volunteering UJA. She was calling at the UJA for, she was very proud of herself that they donated money for her. And she's not hearing too well, so we were joking with her that they'd probably say we can't, and she would say, thank you for 500. But this was 1991, when she was still looking after my father, I think. And she always found time for everything. I don't know how she did it. She didn't pass that gene on to me. This is what Aviva wrote about my mother. Because I don't know if this can read.
Do you want to read it?
No, I don't want. Oh, I should read it out. It's
up to
okay.
you. I mean, I can see it, but it's
Okay, all right. My grandmother was an original. Words don't feel adequate to describe her. She was a symphony. She was the glue that held our family together. She could always be counted on to see clearly through a problem, directly to a solution. She never lost sight of what was truly important. She was ageless. Her advice was always up to the minute, based on 90s realities. She was a religious person in the truest sense of the word. She did not simply follow the laws of Judaism. She incorporated the wisdom of Judaism into the essence of who she was. She was decency, honesty, strength, courage, and intelligence. All you had to do was look at her face, and you could see directly to her soul. There was no phoniness. She was always herself, and people recognized and responded to this. She was a doer. She was not happy to sit idle. She had to be helping. The fact that she could no longer help anyone or do for herself was the most difficult thing for her to accept about her recent disability. She was angry at her body, not afraid, but angry that she could not be useful. She was devoted to her husband and family. Her love was like sunshine. You could always feel her warmth and acceptance. This is not to say she didn't have opinions. She did, and she would voice them freely and often with humor. She leaves a tremendous legacy. She was everything to me. There will always be a hole in my life where she used to be. Riva put it very well. Okay. I don't want to stumble on, okay, so I can do these. I mean, how much patience do you guys have for this?
About 5 minutes left before I have to put new film in.
Okay, all right. So here's I don't know, it's too far away. It's a picture of my mother and her siblings at their last gathering in Budapest, and I don't know the year. So I got this from, my cousin Maya in Bratislava. She had 4 children. She now just has 3. She lived through terrible tragedy, but she sent all the family photographs to me. Okay, so it's 7 siblings, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 siblings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 siblings, yeah, 2 they lost. They're all here together for the last time. They love being together, the Grossmans. So I'm from a small town, but it had a castle, which I never visited the castle. Nobody invited us. Oh, jeez. Oh, God. I don't know, Adam, but here's my mother with me in the stroller. I don't know if I can remove this.
No problem. Just look up.
No, just leave it all,
It's interesting, this was a suede coat on her, and I'm just mentioning it because the guy who took over the house, and we left everything behind, like she didn't take that with her. When we came back, he had breeches. He had breeches made from my mother's coat, so obviously he wasn't pleased that we came back. Not that we needed the coat anymore, but that's the way it went. That's who you're surrounded by. So here I am with, this is too laborious for you guys. I don't know, I'm just getting too much. I'm here in a rocking chair with Maya at the grandparents' house together, and she was like, even for the picture, she would straighten things out for me. She was like my, looking after me always. Poor girl had such a difficult life in the end. Okay, this is my auntie. Oh, let's see. Oh, boy. My Grossman grandmother and my mother here. I don't know. Adam, am I driving you guys? Like, is this crazy? Too many.
Just open towards me so I can see them a little bit. Okay, so
That's it. I think that's it here. Yeah. So some of them are muddied. In case I forgot to say it, at some point, I don't know what year that would have been. Okay, I'll just to tell the preamble. My parents tried to find different ways to keep me, to make sure that I survive. So one of the times was, first was a plan to send me to Hungary, to my grandmother's uncle, my Jakubovic grandmother's, brother. And a good thing they didn't, because that family was wiped out. The next plan was to send me to Bratislava to Alex and my mother's sister Terry's, when he was at the factory, the Tungstrom factory. And they were supposed to be, Gentiles. So I am there, and Maya goes to school, and I'm always, at home I don't do anything, and it's scary, and there's blackout, and there are raids, and you have to be quiet and dark at night. And then Maya asked one day to take me to school with her, and so she takes me, and within very few minutes, the girls turn at me and go, Żydówka, Jew. And Maya packs me up and brings me back home, because now I'm putting all of them in danger. And so my father comes for me, and he takes me home. But this picture is so badly, this is how we found it after the war. But I want to show you that you could probably, if you looked at this picture of people in the picture, you could tell who the Jewish child was. And that's clearly me, with the big bow in my hair. No, the dark bow, because these were visitors, sorry. This is totally, I think this is pretty well ruined, but they can pick it, you can pick.
A little lower,
Lower? You
Lower,
can-
more. Even lower. That's good.
So I was just, I was dangerous for them. One time I was on a train with Harry. The last time we went to Eastern Slovakia to see my father's sister. The last time I saw her. And we stop at a station, and there's a guy sitting on a bench, and I say to Harry, "See, it's a gypsy." He said, "No." He said, "How do you know?" I said, I know who the gypsies are, and everybody knows who the Jews are. So, yeah. You get schooled in those things there, It's very important. Oh, God. This picture is, I want to definitely share with you. So here we are, two girls. The time is, the date is spring 1950. We are finishing grade 8 in Montreal. Lower?
Yeah, right there's fine.
I don't know, I can't. So this is Rona Meisels with me.
A little bit lower.
Lower?
A little bit lower. Right there. Okay, see it. Yeah.
Done. Rona, look how beautiful she is. That's Rona here. We're still wearing our European clothes. I thought she was beautiful. So we're like, 13 years old? 12. That's Rona. And this is my high school, first year, Harvard Collegiate. Everybody's Jewish here, I think.
What year is that?
Uh-huh. So it would be 1950, I think. Yeah, 1950. So I'm here, and Tybee is here. This is Sally Feldman. She was lovely. They were all lovely kids, but Sally Feldman connected with me. Her father had a corner store at the corner of Spadina and what's this, Harvard? It's now the women's athletic center. They had a general store there. Yeah. Grade 11, grade 11, Harvard Collegiate. This is my mother's younger sister, and she loved flowers. And I took her. Lily of the Valley was growing in my garden. Now they're kind of tired. But my mother planted. Whatever's growing there is my mother's planting. So that's the youngest one enjoying the flowers. This is all random stuff. This is, how we could take very few out of things out of Czechoslovakia when we left. So it was a practice to, when you give a child a birthday gift, you got a book. So here's Maya sending me this book, but I don't know what the book was. We weren't allowed to take that much stuff, so whatever the book was, I just took the first page that told me who gave it to me. So this was from Maya. And then my mother's, the others were from this was for my very good results in the school year of 47-48. And it's Regina Deutschova. Do you know, I asked, do you know Yuri Deutsch? No, he's a photographer. Yuri Deutsch, D-O-J-C. So his mother was my teacher. So I've got a prize from her, and this is, so my mother in 1945 gave me a book. I don't know what the book was, but I just brought these papers. Useless stuff, but sentimental, like the mandolin that now hangs in Aviva's music room. Yeah, crazy. I don't know what this is. This is in, so that the house that my mother, the town that my mother is from, was called Trebišov, and I don't know how many Jews live there, but my mother, that's the youngest sister and my mother, walking on the street, but get a close look because there's Hebrew there. Buffet.
Hold it a little.
Kosher buffet.
Hold it lower.
What year is that?
Lower. A little bit lower.
Well, it would have been 30s, I think.
Where is this?
It's Eastern Slovakia, Trebišov.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, which ones are? So, this is my mother and Alex Lipschitz, the hero. This is how we found some of the pictures. I don't have to show it. My mother with me in the yard. My mother and her sisters. No, I don't. In their home. Okay. This is my Aunt Terry. She was so beautiful, and then she just got totally destroyed by life. She had this. This is her husband. He was so handsome for those years. Oh, this is my, I don't know, it's too small. I don't know if you can get it. My English uncle Mickey and Zenta, whom I adored. My Grossman grandmother, the year is 1926. She's wearing a shaitel, and she's in Karlsbad. You know, where they used to, you go for your health, you drink the water or something. The water is supposed to be healing, and they each get a mug to carry to the source of the water. So this is my grandmother, Grossman, here. I don't know how, in the front with the white collar. Oh, I have a bigger picture of these. My parents and I. I'll have to find that. Oh, the weddings. The Jewish weddings look so elegant. That would be my aunts or my parents, I don't know. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, done?
I've got it.
Okay, thank you. 1934. So that must have been, I don't know what. Okay. Thank you for being patient. I think I got that. What did I want to show you? My Toronto grandchildren.
Nice.
Okay. Where's my, this is the Boston Audrey, and this is 13-year-old Noah.
A little lower. Okay, got him.
Okay. So this is my cousin Maya in her older years. And this is her brother and his wife.
A little bit lower.
Lower.
Yep, there you go, I can see him.
And this is one of the brothers' twin sons, but this is Ruzhenka. This is this aunt who just sacrificed everything and stayed with the family. Alex was her brother, who was the one killed in. She's just beautiful, angelic person. There were 13 kids, but I don't know how many are there here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are only 8 here. This was my grandfather, my Grossman grandfather. Okay, what else have I got that I can show you? Thank you for putting up with me. I'm so slow. I just don't want to fall. I can't believe you can do that.
You didn't show your husband, did you?
What?
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit lower. I just tilted a little because it's reflecting. There we go. You drove a tractor? And my
I
daughter-
didn't drive. No, I
my
just
daughter
sat in
drives
it.
a Zamboni. There you go. Okay, right there's good. I can
God,
see
oh.
it. I saw it. I can see it.
You did? Oh,
I can see it. It's recorded.
you are awesome.
Okay.
Okay, wedding picture. Yes? No?
That's, yeah, hang on. I can see it.
You're a magician, if you can do that.
So, where did you guys get married?
Sher Shomayim on Sinclair. It doesn't exist anymore.
No, I know. Okay, terrific.
I can put it back after.
You know, I'm of two minds about that, unfortunately.
That's okay.
I think we, the people who are concerned about it, basically we, the Jewish people, and maybe some others will feel with us, would like to believe that if people knew how bad things were and how horrific it was and how just inconceivable it was to take people and just murder them for their religion, that maybe the world will come to their senses. But unfortunately, I don't see any signs that it's going in that direction. And so I'm really feeling very, very low and scared for the grandchildren's generation in this world where I'm hearing voices that I thought I'd never hear again, you know, being so upset about Jews existing and seeing us as evil people that need to be, need to be destroyed. So I'm of two minds. I'd like to be an optimist. For my grandchildren's generation, I would like to be an optimist. So I'd like to work on that and look for signs of optimism. So bring them on. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's important to record this just even for the next generations to know. And I'm feeling it now because all of a sudden I reached a crazy age I didn't know, and time is short. And once we're gone, I mean, I never thought that I was a Holocaust survivor. I thought only the people who were in camps were the survivors. So I didn't even, I just thought, well, I was just a kid. What do I know? But I'm not a kid now, and I have some memories. So, I think we have to do this. But I'm worried when the voices are silenced, what will be. And maybe the world will change. Maybe we'll see some change, but I'd like to hope. I'd like to hope.